Hello everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast. This phish goes to 11 with guest Snow, DEF CON 22 Social Engineering CTF Black Badge winner. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speaker is Stephanie Carruthers, a social engineering professional. If during the webcast you have any questions for Stephanie, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Stephanie. Stephanie, just go ahead and unmute and you should be ready to go.
All right, sorry about that. All right, thank you for the introduction. I first want to thank all of the attendees for taking the time out of their day to join. I know you guys on the West Coast are probably just waking up and getting your coffee, and everyone on the East Coast is getting ready for lunch, so I really appreciate it. And also I wanted to thank SANS for facilitating and hosting this as well. All right, a little bit about myself. So my name is Stephanie, and you can also call me Snow. And I'm sorry, I'm having slide deck. There we go. Yeah, you could also call me Snow. I am actually from Salt Lake City, Utah, and that's kind of a fun story. So if you ever have time or run into me at a conference, feel free to ask me about that. I am a DEF CON 22 Social Engineering Capture the Flag Black Badge winner. And in my free time, I enjoy doing special effects makeup, going to theme parks such as Disneyland, and also playing tabletop games. All right, I am the owner of Snow Offensive Security, go figure, where we perform some really cool assessments. So we do phishing, vishing, physical security, penetration testing, open source intelligence gathering, as well as security awareness training. All right, so I'm going to talk about the agenda for today, but before I get into that, I really wanted to discuss how I came up with this talk. So when I go into client sites, sometimes I see reports from past pen tests or phishing campaigns, or I'll see some things that companies use internally for their phishing. And what I'm seeing is a lot of times companies use one generic template. They're not customized, they're not trying new things. It's very, very basic. There's not a lot to it. And with this idea, I started really focusing on OSINT. So that way I can craft unique campaigns to make them more realistic. And another thing with these, I am able to do user tracking, so that way I'm able to keep statistics and see if users are getting better over time. So a real high level of what we're going to be talking about today is Phishing 101. So really, what does a phish look like, what it is, methodologies, OSINT showcase. I'm going to be showing you some certain things that I look for when developing my pretext. Phishing resurrection. So sometimes phishes do fail, and we're going to talk about why and what you can do by adding vishing to hopefully make them still succeed. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about training. And we're going to be going over a recent breach, as well as how incorporating OSINT into your pretext can make for a better training program. Okay, Phishing 101. So in this section, we're going to be talking about what a phish is, the methodology, as well as anatomy of a phish. So what is a phish? A phish is social engineering via email. It's sending out an email to targets, trying to get them to comply to an action, whether the action is just simply clicking a link. The link could also go to a portal, so you might be trying to capture credentials, or even sending some type of malicious attachment. And these are things that make phishing successful. So it is cost effective. I don't have to spend hours or days trying to find an O-day. I just do some research, craft a campaign, and that's it. It doesn't take a lot of time. Excuse me. It's also scalable. So once I craft this campaign, it's already ready. Whether I send it to one person or 10,000 people, that doesn't affect me. It's really easy to scale. And then also we have campaigns and attacks. They could be fully automated. And what I mean behind this is a lot of people hide behind two-factor, but I could create a campaign that once the user clicks a link, it takes them to a portal. Not only will it catch your username and password, it could also catch your two-factor token. And if this is the case, my framework, the backend system, it could spin up a browser, dump in all those credentials, log into your actual company page, and hold and keep refreshing the session. That way I don't have to rush back to my computer, try to get in as fast as I can. You know, I can take my time, finish my sushi, and I'll be ready for when I need it. And then lastly, to be successful, the attack needs to work on only one target. So whether I'm sending this to 100 people or 5 people, it doesn't matter. It only takes one user to execute this payload, whatever it may be, for it to be successful. All right, phishing campaign methodology. So we have 4 stages here. The first stage is campaign creation. We're going to talk about this quite a bit with OSINT-based pretexts. And then we also have testing and delivery. So I am able to send multiple tests to my client to see which way I can get into their inboxes. Then we have interaction, so I can see which employees are actually maybe clicking the link. That way I can track. And then as well as exploitation. So if they click the link, are they actually going in and entering their credentials? All right, anatomy of a good phish. So here are 5 components that I believe make a great phish. So we're going to start with no target desires. So if I'm performing OSINT, I also look for things like if employees are talking about whether they like something or don't like something. So for an example, I found my clients, some of their employees on Facebook, and they actually had a user group set up that wasn't private, so I was able to see all their conversations, and 90% of them were about work. And one employee was talking about their new home office and how they had just got onto Office 365 and how much they love it for their personal use. A lot of other employees started chiming in saying how much they didn't like what their company was currently using, and many of them agreed that they would love to move to Office 365. So that's really understanding their desires. So that would be a great phish, knowing that a lot of them would want to move in that direction. Then we have sensible payload. So this is something that we really want to make sure matches. So if I use the example from above, I would create a spoofed portal, so that way it makes sense with the phish. So the phish will be coming from Office 365 and have a link to migrate and set up their new account with this new thing, this new email service. And then we go on to attention grabbing. This is a little difficult. It's really trying to find the middle ground. You don't want it to be super flashy, like click here to be entered to win $500 or an iPad, and you don't want it to be very boring and templated that, you know, users would ignore or spam would pick up. You want to find something in the middle. So for some examples, your account has been locked out, your Office 365 email migration is ready, your expense report has been rejected, things of that nature. And then we get into analytics. I talk about this a lot. It's very important to track users. That way you can see which users are, excuse me, that way you can see which users are complying, and this can help in the future if the campaign is failing for vishing. You can see that, you know, Bob hasn't clicked the link, so I'm going to want to call Bob. I'm not going to want to call someone who maybe already has interacted. And then call to action. This is the bread and butter of a phish. This is the most important thing. This is what compels users to actually comply with your request. So for example, things like this must be completed before 3 p.m., please see page 7 of this document, or log in now to complete the email migration. All right, so that kind of wraps up Phishing 101. So now we're going to move on to OSINT Showcase. So in this area, I'm going to be talking about different methods I use for OSINT gathering, some recent breaches that have been caused by phishing, and then also show some examples that I do when I use OSINT-based pretexts for phishing. All right, so OSINT gathering. So I typically look in these three categories, which are vendors, company sensitive, and employee specific. So when I'm looking for vendors, what I'm really looking for are exact companies, so I can pretend to be them or leverage them somehow to elicit trust. So some areas where I use this is Google hacking, the companies on website, job listings, LinkedIn, and Glassdoor. And coming up, I'll be focusing on Google hacking and the company website. Then we have company sensitive information. This is kind of a term that my company uses for information that may seem innocuous to some, like maybe their operating system. But if you're able to get a lot of these pieces of information, that could really make an effective phish. So for company sensitive, ways I find these are through Google hacking, Glassdoor, Iconosquare, which is Instagram, I'll talk about that later, LinkedIn, and also the company website. And then if I am spear phishing, I am looking at specific employees. I am trying to find information on someone specific rather than company-wide. So I search for their image, so I use reverse image search, name check, Payroll, and also social media websites. All right, so when I'm looking at vendors, I use Google hacking a lot. And if you see here, I don't know how well you can see, but on the top right corner, it's the Google search I used. So the operator I used was in quotes, and you want to use quotes when searching Google when you're searching for more than one word. So for example, if you were to go to Google right now and type in cats who wear sunglasses, and you see how many search results you get, which is huge, but if you were to put that in quotes, it will narrow it down because it's only searching for that specific phrase in that specific order. So these are some of the suggested vendors that I look for when I am doing vendor reconnaissance. So I look for benefits providers, medical, dental, vision, 401k. I also look for third-party IT, payroll, janitorial, and pest control. All right, sometimes the company's websites will actually give away information about their vendors. So on this website, for example, they're talking about the benefits they provide for their clients. And if you were to click on this link, it brings you to a PDF with lots of information. So we can see who they use for medical, dental, and vision. All right, moving on to company sensitive. So this is important because it helps us build trust with a lot of information we get. So we could try to find like internal lingo. Do they call things certain names, certain names? Do they have an employee login? Maybe we would want to spoof. So we can use Google hacking for this as well. One of the operators I like to use is file type PDF, and it is important that when you use this operator, you don't put spaces in between. So file type :PDF, and then also I have the operator where I use the quotes to search for specific terms. So I was able to find this employee handbook online. This was a massive document. I think it was almost 100 pages, but just on these 2 pages alone, I'm able to get who they bank with, and also that they have free access to a fitness center that could potentially make a good phish as well. Glassdoor. So when I talked earlier about wanting to see specific employee needs, this is one of the places I like to check to see if everyone's complaining about the same thing, or maybe if everyone's loving the same thing, things of that nature, so I could really focus towards something that would capture the employee's attention. All right, Iconosquare. This is actually one of my favorites. Iconosquare is really an Instagram collector. If you were to go to Instagram, you can't search for usernames or hashtags. So this is where Iconosquare comes in handy. So if you were to go to the Iconosquare and search for your target company name, it would also suggest a bunch of different hashtags that use that company name as well. So some popular ones are company name problems or company name workflow. And then, so once you search for these things, you can kind of start going through and seeing what hashtags employees are using and search from there. This picture, I was actually able to gather from an employee who hashtagged their company, And what they didn't realize is they actually had their login credentials in plain sight. So sometimes you don't have to do a phish. They just supply the picture for you. And then there's LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. So I'm also looking for company-sensitive things. So this specific employee not only stated that they're working on creating and updating policies, but they're also very specific to what department. So if I want to impersonate this employee, I would create a phish saying that I'm updating, a specific policy, and I would only target that department. All right, reverse image search. So this is where things kind of get a little creepy. This is a real person at a real job with a real family and a real house. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but unfortunately these things are out there. Attackers are using them. They do better our campaigns. So she had her picture listed on her company website, along with a handful of other employees. I was able to reverse search the image. I actually used Google, but there's also TinEye. And because she used this image on her Twitter account, it did link the two as well. All right, so there's name check. So if you do happen to maybe do a reverse image search or find an employee's social media account through another way, sometimes they have a specific handle that they use. So name check is really cool because you can put in the user's handle, and it shows you where it's unavailable, meaning that it's taken. So for here, this example is actually taken at Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and some others. So we can go through and look at those things to see if maybe there's more information that we can't find on another one of their social media sites. Okay, so these are some recent phishes that we're seeing. Most of them are believed to be originated, causing from phishes, excuse me. So the first one we're going to look at is the Sony Breach. So this happened in late 2014. So the attackers used LinkedIn to find specific employees with jobs, and they used their names and their titles to create their phishing campaign. They sent multiple phish through a good handful of months, and when they did this, they had the phish sent to these employees stating that they needed to log into their Apple account to verify their account, and they actually had a spoofed website that was exactly like the Apple login page, and they were able to gain credentials through there. And then we move on about a year later to the Anthem Breach. This was a pretty big one. This affected a lot of people, up to 80 million Americans. So this one was presumed to be started by phish. If we look at LinkedIn, their employees gave out a lot of company-sensitive information. Job posting also gave out company-sensitive information. So we could speculate that the attackers did use OSINT when they crafted their phishes to make them more specific, and they were able to capture 5 employees' credentials. And then we have something very recent, the Alpha Payroll breach. So this one happened not that long ago. The attackers spoofed the CEO and emailed an employee, and they requested all W-2 forms from their customers. And this employee complied to the request, and then they were terminated. All right, so now I'm going to give some examples of phishes that I have done using OSINT. So if we look here on the left, I'm kind of showing you some OSINT examples, what I found, and then on the right is the email that I created. Please ignore my logo and my name. This is just for demonstration purposes. So I did discover a target employee on LinkedIn. And on their LinkedIn, they gave away information like the example we saw before, but they were upgrading their benefits page. And I also discovered on Glassdoor that many employees were complaining about the medical benefits. So putting those two together, I had a really good phish. But I was missing something. I didn't know that this particular employee, I didn't know her signature, her writing style. So what I did is I created an email just to this employee who was on LinkedIn, just asking her some questions. And when she replied, I was able to get, her grammar style and also her signature. So it made my phish, a lot more realistic. So here in the email, there's actually an attachment for this one, but it's pretty much saying, we've updated our medical benefits. This is a better plan. It's the same cost, so hopefully employees are getting excited. Attached is plan information. And then I was asking everyone to view the attachment because it had the different plan categories, so they're going to want to check them out. And the call to action is really at the bottom of page 4, please sign it and then return it by this date. So I really have 2 call to actions there. I'm asking them not only to open the document and sign it, but I'm also asking them to return it by a specific date. This phish was pretty successful, and this was a lot of fun. My next example is of using a vendor. So I spoofed an external source. So I used Google hacking to find one of my clients' vendors, which happened to be a training company. And not only did I find that they were the client, I also found that one of my clients gave a testimony, which they had on their page. So I know it's the client. I know a specific point of contact there as well. So what I did is I found different login pages for this training company, and I noticed that they were all branded. So they would have their clients' logos on them. So I created a spoofed website of what exactly the portal looked like. That way, if employees had visited in the past, it would look exactly the same. And then I used LinkedIn at the end to gather my list of targets, and I searched for employees who were non-IT related. And so for this one, there's no attachment, but there is a link. The call to action that I have in here is that they needed to log in to set up this training by a specific day. And I also used the name of the employee who did give the testimony. That way, it builds a little bit more trust. So that wraps up OSINT. So now we're going to move on to phishing resurrection. So we're going to talk about why phishing campaigns fail, what Vishing is, why we can use Vishing, and Vishing campaign notes. So why campaigns fail? A lack of OSINT. Whether it's we can't find the information, maybe employees aren't posting a lot of information. This could be something, they're on their A game. They're not putting information out there that we could use. Bad pretext. I have had clients in the past who have asked me to use specific pretext campaigns, which aren't always necessarily the best, or I've had one that actually asked me to use a previous one. So they were doing the same campaign twice. That's not really fair, and employees are going to be used to it, so they're not going to comply to it. Well-trained employees, they are out there, believe it or not. There are companies that their employees just won't fail. They've had a lot of training. They understand, maybe they know who to report it to, but they understand and they're not failing for these campaigns. Or technology works. The filters are working. Maybe they just simply aren't getting the emails. So Vishing. Vishing is voice phishing. It's using the phone to try to elicit information. So when I do Vishing, I'll talk about that in a second. But I did want to say that Vishing is a lot harder than phishing. It is, when you're talking to someone on the phone, it's so much harder to get them to go to a link compared to an email where they just simply click something. All right, why do we use Vishing? So we use it for credibility. Many people trust in the phone system. It helps us just build more trust. And then questions. Maybe the employee did get the phishing email, but they had questions, or maybe they doubted it. So if we call them, we give them that chance to ask us questions. Insight. If I'm calling someone on a follow-up campaign, maybe I don't know, but maybe their IT caught the phish and already blocked the domain. So if I call this employee, they can say, oh, there is an issue, and I can find out the issue. That way I can fix it. Or also, no training. Many companies don't train on phishing. They specifically train on phishing. So employees don't know how to react to that. While companies have technology to assist them with phishing detection and prevention, your employees are really the first line of defense against phishing. Good luck, have fun. All right, some campaign notes. So when I do follow-up vishing, I have to make sure the pretexts match. I'm not going to send an email from Office 365 and then call and say I'm someone else and try to get them to go to link. You want to make sure they mesh right. Prepare for questions. Think of things that employees might ask. That way I can think on my feet a little bit better and kind of well prepared. And that fallback strategy. Maybe if the domain was blocked, I could have an additional phishing website set up so that way I could have employees go to that. Then there's VoIP and caller ID spoofing. If I am doing caller ID spoofing, I want to make sure I'm using the right phone number, but also some employees actually have a callback policy. Like literally, they will just hang up and call back. They don't understand the policy. They just think that if someone calls and they don't really know, they just hang up and call them back. They don't ask questions. They don't verify. So you want to make sure you have a legit number set up that they can call back. And then also voicemail. I have been pretty happy with results that I get from voicemails. A lot of times, if I leave one, it adds to that legitimacy, and they actually will comply to the request. All right, now we're going to talk about training. We're going to go over the Alpha Payroll case study, and we're also going to talk about integrating assessments into your training program. So this is the Alpha Payroll breach that happened very recently. What had happened was an employee fell for a phishing scam, and we're going to talk about that here. So what had happened was this top section is actually the letter that the company reported to the state of New Hampshire. So they said on or about March 2nd, which still confuses me. How do you not know a specific date? An Alpha Payroll employee responded to a phishing scam email in which the sender represented himself or herself to be the CEO of Alpha Payroll. And they disguised his or her email address as that of the CEO. In this email, the fraudster requested copies of all 2015 W-2 forms produced by Alpha Payroll on behalf of its customers. As a result of hidden command embedded within the email by the sender, upon responding to the email, the reply message was rerouted and sent to an email account, that of a third-party sender. So why did this fail? So it's really the trifecta of failure. Technology failed. The attacker was able to send a spoofed email to employees. Why is your filter not picking that up? And then training failed. The training in place most likely didn't educate the employee on how to spot internally spoofed emails, or maybe to verify if the CEO asked for this information. And then we have policy failure. In an article on CSO Online, they did note that a lot of people said that there was possibly an internal policy against sharing W-2 data, which could be the case, but I mean, it didn't really have an effect here. They still failed the policy. All right, so course correction. So this is what Alpha Payroll did to correct themselves. They terminated the employee. In their letter, they made it very clear that the victim of the attack was terminated. They also said they were going to redouble training. But that still doesn't go back to your technology problem. When I talk about increased training, So when I talk about increased training, you really want to make sure that they're covering policy and things of that nature. A lot of times, employees see a policy and they only read it one time that they're with this company. They're not going to memorize every single policy. So something that they should be doing is making sure that they're staying relevant and training employees on these policies. Our integrating assessments. So for training, you really want to make sure that you are doing a company-wide reach. If you have a large company, I mean, that means sending emails to every employee. That way you are able to track users, track the behavior, keep sending out these campaigns so you can see, are these employees improving? Maybe we need to change the pretext. Or if employees are staying very steady at failing, maybe these particular employees need additional training. That's where we get into analyzing. You really want to make sure that you're keeping track of all this information, as well as educating. Like I mentioned, if an employee keeps failing, they need additional education. And then keep retesting, doing this every so often so you can track. And then empowerment. We really want to make sure that our employees feel empowered, that they understand the attack, that they can identify it, that also they know who to report it to if there is an issue. All right, so that's kind of wrapping things up. I talked very fast, I appreciate that. But just going over Phishing 101, we talked about what a phishing campaign looks like, what makes it a good one, and then also the OSINT showcase. I went over examples of where we find information online to better our phishing campaigns. And then phishing resurrection. If a phish fails, we can add Vishing to it to increase our chances of getting users to comply. And then wrapping up with training, we talked about why OSINT-based phishing can help our campaigns and also our security awareness programs. I do have some time for Q&A. I really appreciate it. If anybody would like a copy of my slide deck, please feel free to email me at the email address listed here, and I can send that to you. Again, thank you so much for your time, for joining and listening, and thank you so much to SANS for having me. I really appreciate it, guys.
All right, thank you for that great presentation. We have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for Stephanie, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question, Stephanie, is very easy. Someone wanted to know, what was the name of the website where you did pound company name workflow searches?
So for the example, that company was actually, I'm going to try to pull the slide up just a second, but that was for a college. I believe it was Cornell College. Let me see. Oh, so for Iconosquare, I'm sorry, was it Iconosquare the question, or was that for the?
Well, maybe they can clarify. What they originally wrote was, what was the name of the website where you did pound company name workflow searches?
Oh, okay. Yep, nope, you're right. It is Iconosquare, yes.
Okay.
Iconosquare.com.
Yeah, and she has clarified that that's correct. That's what she was asking. Okay, let me start at the top here. Give me 1 minute, please.
Sure.
See here. All right, so this one came in about 25 minutes ago. If I only use the concurrent viewer feature in Gmail and Outlook to view a document or image, how much more protection, if any, does that give me?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. If I only use the concurrent viewer feature in Gmail and Outlook to view a document or image, how much more protection, if any, does that give me?
It really depends on how the phish is made, what tactics the attacker is using to send it. If they're actually spoofing your internal DNS, they can send it. It could look exactly as it was sending from your company. They could have purchased a domain name that may look like your company. It really depends on how they send it.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie, are you hearing an echo?
No, I'm not.
Okay, if it's okay with you, I'm going to mute you while I read the questions because I'm here.
Sure.
We'll try that. And I'll unmute you when I'm done reading it.
Okay.
Okay, what type of tool do you use to phish?
So I actually have my own framework where there's multiple stages, and this is something that we use internally. But there are other frameworks out there, such as Phishing Frenzy, as well as Go Phish and the Social Engineering Toolkit.
Okay, thank you. Is it true that if a user is operating only in standard user mode, Windows, that malware cannot download until and unless the user enters their local admin level password?
So I'm not quite sure about that question. I think it really depends on how it's set up internally. I wouldn't really know. It depends on really how they have it set up.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, have you seen issues with employees distrusting other communications from their IT departments after an internal phishing test?
Unfortunately, yes, this is something that we do see. You do get some users who tend to be possibly paranoid, but at the same time, it's actually happening right now to a phish I'm doing. I called and I was able to get a lot of information and through OSINT and find that they're actually in the middle of doing a migration to another payroll service. And so I called and I sent emails spoofing the login website to try to get them to go to my website to capture those credentials. Unfortunately, I actually received an email from my client stating that they were having issues because the legitimate emails, all the employees were starting to question. So that is something we do see.
Okay, thank you. If I only use the snipping tool to copy an image and then save it, am I protected from the malware that could accompany the downloading of an image from the internet directly?
Sorry, I think I'm a little bit confused by that question. If you're just taking an image of your screen, there shouldn't be any malware associated with an image. It's really already downloaded, but if you're just taking an image, it's just strictly an image.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, have you had to engage in campaigns for companies outside of the U.S.? How did you deal with the language barrier and the differences in culture?
Yeah, so I actually haven't had to deal with outside the U.S., so I haven't ran into that issue. I've only dealt with U.S. only.
Okay, thanks. Do you use any frameworks for performing your phishing, such as GoPhish or Phishing Frenzy?
I actually have my own framework that I've been using that I love. It's really good, but there are definitely multiple frameworks out there, but I'm not using one of the ones like GoPhish.
All right. What is normally your very first place to search for OSINT? OSINT?
Yes, OSINT. So sometimes the company does predict whether they want me to spoof internal or external. So if they do have a preference, that's really where I start. So if they want me to spoof an external source, you know, they don't want to pretend to be anyone internal, I do start at Google hacking. My first thing is to identify vendors. Once I can identify these vendors, I kind of search from there. Do I know anyone specifically who's working with the vendor, any specific products that they use for the vendor? I try to build out as much as I can once I get that information.
All right. Do you use any macro-based attacks when performing your phishing? How do you bypass protections?
Sorry about that. So I have done that before, but they are enabled. They are protected.
I'm not sure if I cut you off there. Sorry, Stephanie. Were you finished?
Oh, yep, I'm sorry. So yes, when I have done those in the past, they are not enabled. They're protected.
I think I just cut you off again, trying to avoid the echo. I'll go ahead to the next question if that's okay.
Sure.
What tools or tool do you use for v-phishing, particularly around spoofing phone numbers?
I'm not sure if I'm still muted. So for Vishing, I use SpoofTel. So this lets me choose any phone number I want to pretend that I'm coming from. They also have a really cool SMS feature. So if I want to send text as well, that's something that's really cool. But for the most part, I use SpoofTel unless I do realize that employees are using a callback policy, then I actually go and I'll purchase something like a Skype VoIP phone number for the area code that I would like to impersonate. So that way, if they do call me back, I am able to receive it. And then SpoofTell also has a pretty cool feature where I can record calls as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. Do SPF records really make a difference any longer with preventing or stopping phishing?
Yes, they still do. I actually, when I send out my testing campaigns to my client, I test a handful of different sending methods. And my last test, which I get about a 99% success for getting it into inboxes, is actually using Amazon Web Service sending email service. So it's AWS SES. So this really helps legitimize your email and get you past filters.
Okay, thank you. It seems like a lot of companies focus on flashier networks and software vulnerabilities. Is it difficult to get companies to understand how phishing and vishing are a greater concern?
No, not really anymore.
All right. What is your workflow to move from a compromised account, such as phished OWA credentials, to an actual session within the target environment?
So right now I'm using Selenium. It's a WebDriver, so it's actually an API that's put into Python. So once the user enters in all these credentials, it happens instantly. It spins up a real web browser. It logs you in using those credentials, and it just refreshes.
All right. Do you rely on spoofing a target's domain, or do you send from domains you own? I understand it may also depend on the campaign.
Yes, that's a great question. So when I send my testing emails, before I actually launch the campaign, I send a handful of different ways. The first way is I do try to spoof the company's internal DNS, so that way it can actually look like it's legitimately coming from their domain. I also use my own domains and my own SMTP servers as well. And then lastly, I try sending it through the AWS SES. So those are kind of my methods of testing to see which ones actually make it into their inbox.
All right. How do you deal with any kind of legal requirements associated with cloning other corporate websites or purporting to be from said website using other corporations, logos, etc.?
So to deal with that, I really make sure that it's in scope, and as well the client approves this. And then can you repeat that question? I'm not sure if I got the last part.
Sure. How do you deal with any kind of legal requirements associated with cloning other corporate websites or purporting to be from said website using other corporations, logos, etc.?
Okay, right. So what I do is I just make sure that it's in scope and that the client approves it.
All right. When spoofing the target's domains, how do you test to ensure that it works without tripping the defenses of the target organization?
So when I do this, I work with the client on testing. I send out those 3 different methods that I talked about, and if they do receive it, they will let me know.
Thank you. Regarding compromised OWA credentials, rather than automating logging into the OWA portal, how do you get an actual shell?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I'm not sure I understood it.
Sure. Regarding compromised OWA credentials, rather than automating logging into the OWA portal, how do you get an actual shell?
I don't actually get a shell. I'm just capturing their credentials.
All right. After adding Vishing, how much more successful are your campaigns?
Well, So I see about a 5 to 10% increase, and that question's kind of unique. When someone asks what percentage you get for a campaign, a lot of times I've heard people in the past say, oh, I get 80% success rate. And I ask them, how do you get that number? And a lot of times they say, I sent out an email to 100 people and I got 80 clicks. But if I ask if they were unique clicks, they don't necessarily know the answer to that. So really it's tracking unique activity from each user to get a realistic percentage. But I do see about a 5 to 10% increase when I do add phishing.
What's the best thing you've discovered so far via OSINT for a phishing campaign?
I'd have to say the example I used, using that Facebook group, seeing all the employees really get riled up about something very specific and then being able to turn around and make a successful campaign out of it.
All right, I have one question left. So if a couple more just popped into the window, so I guess we do have a few more. How do you track individual users?
So how I do this is in the framework that I've used and developed. Before I actually send out the campaign, I hash on every target's email address, so that way I'm able to track if they click the link and as well as enter their credentials. That way I can really get a good overall picture.
Okay. It looks like someone needs some clarification here. They said, what did you say the name of the tools you use for credential capture portals that pass the target along to the real site?
Yes, that is Selenium. But we actually have a framework that we use that we have set up that is our own. But Selenium is the web driver that does that.
Thanks. What do you use to automate reporting? Is that just functionality you have within your custom framework?
Yes, that is built into my framework.
All right. Well, with that, we are out of questions. Stephanie, is there anything you'd like to add, or are we all finished?
No, I really want to thank everyone for listening in, and hopefully you learned something. And I just really want to thank SANS as well. I appreciate it. I do have some, hopefully, events coming up. I will be getting those added to my website, hopefully here pretty soon. So please feel free to check that out. And thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. I wanted to remind all of you that you can find your CEUs for all completed webcasts by logging into your SANS portal account, navigate to your account dashboard, then click My Webcasts. You can then download your CEU from the right-hand side of the web page. Also, a reminder that the slide deck will not be posted to the SANS page, so please contact Stephanie at stephanie@snowoffensivesecurity.com if you're interested in receiving those. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, you can visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.